The library smelled of old books and freshly brewed coffee, the kind of mix that felt both comforting and invigorating. It was nearly midnight, and the towering shelves cast long shadows across the dimly lit study room. Maya tapped her pen against the edge of the table, her brow furrowed as she stared at her laptop screen. She was stuck. Again. The data just didn't add up. Their presentation was due in less than 36 hours. Still overthinking it? A low, teasing voice broke her concentration. Maya looked up to see Elijah leaning against the doorframe, holding 2 cups of coffee. His sweatshirt hung loosely on his tall frame, and his dreadlocks were pulled into a low bun that somehow made him look effortlessly cool, even at this ungodly hour. He walked toward her, setting one of the cups on the table with a grin. "You should drink that before your brain implodes," he said, sitting down across from her. "Thanks, but coffee won't fix this," Maya muttered, pushing her laptop toward him. "Look, the numbers don't align with our hypothesis, and if we don't figure it out, the entire project will fall apart." Elijah raised an eyebrow, taking a sip of his coffee before swiveling the laptop toward himself. "Relax. Let me take a look. You've been staring at this for hours. Sometimes all you need is a fresh pair of eyes." Maya sighed, leaning back in her chair. She tried not to stare at him while he worked, but it was impossible not to notice the way his long fingers moved across the keyboard with confidence, the furrow of his brow as he studied the data. He had this easy, magnetic presence that seemed to draw people to him without effort, something Maya had been pretending not to notice all semester. They'd been paired together for their final project in their statistics class, and from day one, Elijah had been full of surprises. She'd assumed he'd be laid back to the point of being lazy, but he'd proven her wrong. He was smart, brilliant even, but in a quiet, unassuming way. He wasn't like the guys who tried to dominate every group project. Instead, he listened, gave thoughtful suggestions, and always had her back when she doubted herself. And that grin of his? It was a problem, a big one. "Got it," Elijah said suddenly, snapping her out of her thoughts. "What?" Maya leaned forward, her heart skipping a beat. He turned the laptop toward her, a triumphant glint in his eyes. "You missed a key variable in the dataset. I adjusted the parameters, and now everything lines up. Our hypothesis holds." Maya blinked at the screen, her jaw dropping as she processed the corrected data. "You're kidding. How did I miss that?" "You've been running on fumes," Elijah said, his voice softer now. "Cut yourself some slack, Maya. You're the hardest working person I know." She met his gaze, and for a moment the room felt smaller, quieter. His eyes were warm, steady, and there was something in them that made her pulse quicken. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Any time," Elijah replied, his smile softening. The next day was a whirlwind. They worked tirelessly in the library, piecing together the presentation slide by slide. Maya was meticulous, organizing the data into clear visuals, while Elijah handled the narrative, weaving their findings into a compelling story. They argued over font sizes and color schemes, laughing at how ridiculous it all seemed after hours of stress. "Fine you win," Maya said, rolling her eyes, as Elijah insisted on using a bold orange accent for their title slide. "But if Professor Hart says it's too flashy, I'm blaming you." "Blame away," he shot back, flashing her that grin again. "At least it won't put the class to sleep." By the time they finished, the sun was beginning to rise, casting golden light through the library windows. Maya stretched, her body aching from hours of sitting, and Elijah stood beside her, his hands on his hips as they admired their work. "We did it," she said, a mix of relief and pride in her voice. "Of course we did," Elijah replied. "We make a good team." Something about the way he said it made her stomach flip. She looked up at him, and for the first time, she didn't look away when their eyes met. "Yeah," she said softly, "we do." Presentation day arrived, and they nailed it. The class was captivated. Professor Hart nodded approvingly, and when they finished, their peers broke into applause. Maya felt a wave of relief wash over her as she sat back down, her heart still pounding from the adrenaline. Elijah leaned over, his shoulder brushing hers. "Told you we'd crush it." Maya laughed, shaking her head. "You're insufferable, you know that." "But you love it," he teased, winking at her, and to her surprise, she didn't deny it. Later that evening, they found themselves on the campus quad, the air crisp and cool as they walked beneath the string lights that crisscrossed the trees. Elijah had insisted on celebrating their success, and Maya, despite her usual reluctance, had agreed. "You know," he said, kicking a loose pebble along the path, "this might sound cheesy, but I'm really glad we got paired for this project." "Really?" Maya raised an eyebrow. "Even with all my nagging?" "Especially with your nagging," Elijah said, grinning. "It made me better, and I mean it, Maya. You push people to be their best. I needed that." She felt her cheeks warm, her usual quick wit failing her. "Well, you're not so bad yourself," she said finally, her voice soft. They stopped near the fountain, its gentle trickling filling the silence between them. Elijah turned to her, his expression suddenly serious. "Can I say something without you thinking I'm just joking around?" he asked. Maya nodded, her heart thudding in her chest. "I've been wanting to tell you this for a while," he said, stepping closer. "You're incredible, Maya. The way you think, the way you care about everything you do, it's inspiring. And I know when it happened, but somewhere between late-night data sessions and fighting over PowerPoint slides, I fell for you." Maya's breath caught in her throat. She searched his face, looking for any hint of doubt, but all she saw was sincerity. "Elijah," she began, her voice trembling. Before she could finish, he pulled her into a hug. It wasn't the car-friendly kind they'd shared before. It was warm, firm, and filled with so much unspoken emotion that Maya felt her walls crumble. She melted into him, her arms wrapping around his waist as she buried her face in his chest. I think I fell for you too," she admitted, her voice muffled against him. Elijah pulled back just enough to look at her, his hands resting lightly on her shoulders. "You're not just saying that, are you?" Maya laughed, the sound light and free. "No, I'm not." And then, under the glow of the string lights and the gentle hum of the fountain, he kissed her. It was soft at first, tentative, but when she kissed him back, it deepened, becoming something that felt like the start of everything they hadn't realized they were waiting for. The rest of the semester flew by, but their love only grew stronger. They studied together, challenged each other, and dreamed about the future, one where they could tackle life's projects, big and small, as a team. It wasn't always easy, balancing schoolwork and the whirlwind of emotions that came with falling in love. But they made it work. Because if there was one thing they'd learned about each other, it was this. Hard work, whether on a project or on love, was always worth it when they did it together.